they're drunk or whatever, you know, and the guy like latched on to Garret, and at that point I did intervene and I like pushed him away, but I mean, some people you can't really reason with, and I don't know, I guess my point is, I don't want to say no matter what, but pretty much no matter what, you have to remain peaceful. The second you lose legitimacy if you fly off the hinges. And one of the things that, like in the civil rights movement, there's some great like training documents you can read where like they have these training sessions for people doing sit-ins or whatever other actions they were doing where potentially people would attack them, whether individuals or people working for the state. And there are some really great things to read, and people would be like screaming at, they would train for these kind of things. And they were pretty smart too. They would like dress up, and they would try to, maybe they're even smarter than us in that regard, but they would try to maintain that public image. That's so important. You want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. This is one of those situations where the more experience you have with it, like police encounters, the more police encounters you have, you'll become less nervous, more comfortable, more aware of what you need to do next time. And I'd say the same is true when somebody's trying to pick a fight with you and somebody wants to engage in violence. The more experience you have with that, and unfortunately I've got a lot of experience with that, I'd say the more calm you get and the more reasonable you can be. It's hard not to get angry when somebody's angry with you and wanting to attack you, but I guess I bring to the table a certain confidence that I know I can evade just about anyone on foot. And I also know that coming from like a criminal justice or police accountability background, the criminal justice system, as many of us know as libertarians and anarchists, doesn't really provide justice. At the very best, the most it can do is just remove violent people from society. That's really the only thing that it could practically accomplish. But at the same time, what you can do with a camera and documenting someone's bad activity, I think goes above and beyond anything that can be done if nobody documents it and you just tell the story of what this person did that was so bad. So the camera is a wonderful criminal justice tool. I feel like any time when Robin Hooding has gotten to a point, or when I've been out Robin Hooding and someone has tried to engage me with either threats or actual acts of violence, that of course it detracts from the activism. Robin Hooding stops at that point and it becomes about ensuring my safety, ensuring the safety of others, and keeping the camera and the lens focused on them, even if that angers them. And if it does, they need to learn that if the more angry they get, the more lenses are going to be pointed at them. Fortunately, in the situation with that Nick guy that punched James, there was 3 of us who had cameras, and we were triangulating around him. And the reason we began filming is because he began making threats. So I see that's not, of course, Robin Hooding. That's a public safety activism. But of course, that's anything that any of us could do. If you see someone engaging in threats of violence or acts of violence, document it 100%. That's the best thing you can do, and expose their behavior. And that will anger them. I got video of a rather large man named Travis Hobbs trying to attack myself. When he failed to attack myself, he then turned his rage on Graham. Now, I had some serious contemplating to do as to whether or not to file criminal charges against this person. And the straw that broke the camel's back in deciding to put my principles aside and let the state go after one of their biggest supporters was that he continued to make threats of violence. Free speech is great. Robin Hooding, I guess, is a free speech activity. I didn't realize that until we got sued and won on free speech grounds, I guess. But many of these, I mean, I guess maybe not to stereotype, but there's like a little bit of a backwoods element in Keene because it is kind of isolated. And I get the impression that some of these, I'll use a derogatory term like rednecks, some of these people believe that, oh, well, I can threaten you, that's free speech. In fact, the man who threatened Graham said, this isn't criminal threatening, that's when I threaten to kill you, not kick your ass. So that's one thing that's been, I found a little bit disappointing about Keene is that when the video like such with Graham, when somebody's making such extreme threats, I mean, the city officials, they know the PR stuff. The city manager, he backed away from that, and he said that that tow company is off the city's towing list for a while. But like the community itself, I thought it was a rather poor and shameful reaction on some of the parts of the haters to be defending this man's actions, defending threats of violence. So I think that's something that obviously, I wouldn't say capitalize on, but that needs to be documented. People need to, it's a conversation that we need to continue to have. It's unfortunate that Robin Hooding has come to kind of intersect with criminal justice activism at all, but when it goes in that direction, I think that's when it's an accountability project, but if anything needs more accountability than the parking structure, it's the criminal justice system. So more videography in court or of those proceedings would be great.
I don't think it's necessarily an indictment of Keene as a location that people would be in support of someone committing violence against a Robin Hooder. I think that if this were happening to the extent that it is in Keene anywhere else, you would see a violent pushback. You would see people supporting that violence. I mean, people, they went to watch executions, back in the day. So there's certainly a contingent of people out there who have a certain bloodlust, and they love the idea that we might get hurt and that we might, possibly get killed, etc. I know there were at least a couple questions over here. Who hasn't asked a question yet? Who would like to? Okay.
Hi. So talking about cameras and public cameras versus private cameras, I have a couple things. In New Mexico, they used to have some red light cameras, and we heard from one of the people high up in the police department that the public reason was for public safety, because less people run red lights, we have more safety. But what was actually happening was it was a revenue generator, and it created more accidents as people would approach an intersection, they'd slam on their brakes, and you'd end up with a lot of accidents, but they were generating revenue, and eventually they were removed. But those public cameras, already in our town in Albuquerque, there's cameras on every stoplight aimed at the intersections. And I had a small car accident, and the lady gave me some false info. I eventually figured it all out and had my first court experience working through that. So it was I saw it as an opportunity to work through the court system. But I was thinking about those public cameras, and what if I couldn't have figured out who she was and where she was? Could I have gotten a copy of the video footage from the city? I mean, it's publicly funded, and I know in like universities, when you publicly fund a research project, that the results of that become public and people can use it. So if we're publicly funding all of these cameras that the state uses, I think the data should be public.
I'm just going to throw a quick answer out for that one. In New Hampshire, we have the 91A process, and there's a group of activists in Keene that have been meeting over the last few months, to talk about 91A and create 91A requests. So you send this sheet into whatever government agency that you want information from, like video footage, for instance, and they're supposed to respond with that. There are certain excuses they can use in certain circumstances to tell you they are not going to give you the information, but something like that. As James mentioned, with the Robin Hooding situation, they had that cop come out and film 40 hours worth of footage. We have all that footage, and that footage was uploaded to was it Freeman TV Raw? The Freeman TV Raw channel on YouTube. So yeah, in New Hampshire, most of that stuff is absolutely available. Questions from folks who've not asked them?
I don't actually have a question. I just really want to thank you guys, because I think what you're doing is really important. I think I've learned so much since before I moved to New Hampshire and since I moved to New Hampshire from you and from the videos that you post, and understand so much more about why you're doing what you're doing. And even the Robin Hood thing, I know that I think that I've been able to really see how, sorry everybody, I'm gonna swear, how fucked up it is that they would spend so much money and so many resources to sue you again, try and send a PI out, like, to follow you guys around and harass you. I've watched most of the videos that you've talked about today. I've seen. I thought you handled it really well with the towing jerk. And I know that you said something when you posted about how you shouldn't have said one of the things you said, but quite frankly,
I called him a fucking loser at the end. And
but he was. He got out of the car, like, yeah. He didn't pause. He got out and aggressed upon you, and you handled that spectacularly. I have immense respect for you guys, and I just want to thank you.
Any comments, or should we go to the next question?
Probably next question.
Okay. Dustin?
taking actions and you're getting responses. Can you sit back and quantify, based on all the peaceful approaches you've taken to turn it around, to use it, to change the community and work in this project, can you sit back and quantify what's most powerful, what's most effective? You barely touched on the court process here. In my world, looking at you from 3,000 miles away, that's incredibly huge. But is the public response, is the write-ups, what is working? What is making a big change?
Who wants to jump on that first?
That's one of the things that I love about Robinhooding. I mean, we've probably gone through, we're approaching having gone through 10,000 Robinhood cards. So I mean, you could probably conservatively say we've saved, let's just guess, 8,000 people from parking tickets. So I mean, to me, that's a huge quantifiable result. A lot of the things too happen, and then they don't really make the news. Like one particular case, there is a young female. The police had come to a local convenience store, and she was kind of out back, and they were saying like, "Oh, we got reports that kids were drinking out here," and and she was on like, I guess, probation or something. They obviously knew who she was, and they're like, "Oh, we need to look in your bag," and I was like, "You don't have to let them look in your bag." And she's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna," she was about to let them do that. So there's all kinds of things that happen where it's rare too, like you may not even see the impact of something. Like I was at a social gathering one evening on a Saturday night, just like a cookout among friends, and there were non-Free Staters there. And at one point, this guy, and I'm an accountant, he was an accountant, so we were really getting into it and having a good old time. But he mentioned like, "Oh, something interesting happened to me today. I was downtown and these people paid my meter and they left a card." And I was like, "Oh, tell me about that. What do you think?" I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. I used to get so many tickets and in Keene, and this is like the best thing ever." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, I was out earlier today, and it was probably me." Like I told him that. So it was like he's like, "Oh yeah, you're the man." And it's not often that you get to see the results, and sometimes you may like it's interesting, like coming to an event like this. I have a lot of people come up to me and they're like, "I've seen a lot of YouTube videos, and like this lady here, and it had an impact on their life." You don't even know the amount of impact that you're having, and so it's hard to quantify, I guess, is my answer.
The whole thing about court, I mean, it was like a great blessing from the state that they sued us. It got us all this press attention. They didn't have a case to begin with. I mean, you really couldn't have asked for a better situation as far as the state's poor response. And I think it shows that they're getting into new ground. Most of us here have faced some level of criminal charges for our activism in the past, and the fact that I wouldn't say they stopped using criminal charges against us, but the fact that they were trying out this new territory, this civil court, this like friendlier court with us, which I know far less about, which seems far more complicated than criminal court. It's new ground. Fortunately, we had an attorney that stepped up to the plate for us, John Meyer, and he does a whole lot for a lot of good people, providing free legal services. So in addition to like us up here, there are people behind the scenes that are really helping make things work. I think we still probably would have won the case without him, but perhaps they would have slipped us up in a bunch of the legal stuff that we had no idea how that works. So
I don't know, it's hard to know where stuff lands in terms of quantifying. That's something I'm always asking myself, and one way that I can measure that is YouTube views. That's one avenue that you can at least measure, it's kept track of. And there's a couple of the videos, or a handful probably, from Keene have gotten well over 1 million views, which is, that's a huge win anytime. Victimless crime spree is approaching 150K, and that's a win. People at the comments section